This is Mike Mansholt, a 17-year-old from Germany who went missing under some seriously bizarre circumstances. At the time, Mike was a healthy teen, weighing somewhere between 145 and 170 pounds. But when his body was found, it weighed a shocking 35 pounds, and that wasn't the only strange thing. Nearly all of Mike's internal organs were missing, including his heart, brain, lungs, liver, pancreas, stomach, bladder, and small intestine. But what truly baffled investigators and horrified his family was that his body showed no signs of being cut open or torn apart, making it nearly impossible to believe that animals had done this. So the question remains, what really happened to Mike Mansholt?
Wie bist du gestorben, Mike?
Seit mehr als einem Jahr fragt sich das die Familie.
Der Weg zwischen ihm und den Schuhen und seinem Fahrrad, der passt nicht zusammen.
Wir haben oft über die Möglichkeit nachgedacht, ob vielleicht die Sachen von oben runtergeworfen wurden. Aber das auch, da sind wir wieder im spekulativen Bereich. Ja?
Now you might wonder, how did such a young boy end up traveling to another country all alone? Well, Mike wasn't new to traveling. He had been to many parts of the world since he was a child. Born on August 20th, 1998, in the city of Oldenburg, Germany, a place with over 160,000 residents, Mike was raised by his parents Bernd and Suzanne Mansholt. His parents eventually divorced, and both moved on to new partners. Mike stayed with his mother, who later had a daughter named Maria, while his father also had a son named Daniel. Despite the family changes, Mike got along well with both his half-siblings and cherished having them around. He had always longed for brothers and sisters to play with. From a young age, Mike had a heart for adventure. He inherited his love for traveling from his father, who once took him on a journey across the Atlantic Ocean in a sailboat, a trip that lasted over 700 days. They also explored Iceland, Scotland, the Caribbean, and more. Mike's father described him as a kind, polite, and calm boy, even though he was full of curiosity and wonder about the world. In July 2016, 17-year-old Mike decided to travel alone for the very first time. His destination? Malta, a beautiful island country in the Mediterranean Sea, just 58 miles south of Sicily, Italy. With a population of around 500,000 and just over 120 square miles of land, Malta is a popular summer destination known for its beaches, warm climate, and low crime rate. Mike flew there to visit his girlfriend, who was attending a language course, and obviously, he was very excited to visit her. Now, the meeting with his girlfriend took place on the 8th of July, 2016, when Mike landed on the island of Malta. Wasting no time, he headed straight to Valletta, the capital city, where she was waiting. The two were overjoyed to be reunited, and the island seemed like the perfect setting for a romantic and adventurous getaway. They spent the next few days living in the moment, laughing, exploring, and soaking in the Mediterranean sun. Together, they wandered through colorful streets, relaxed on golden beaches, tasted new foods, and admired Malta's historical charm. It was the kind of trip that felt almost magical, the kind that lives on in your heart long after it ends. But for Mike, the trip wasn't ready to end just yet. As their final day approached and his girlfriend prepared to fly back to Germany, Mike had a change of heart. He realized he had fallen in love, not just with the experience, but with Malta itself. He wanted more time to explore its hidden corners, meet new people, and continue the journey on his own terms. So, he made a choice. He gave his girlfriend a warm goodbye, promising to stay in touch, and then informed his parents that he wanted to remain on the island for a few more days. Back in Germany, Mike's mother, Suzanne, was at home, while his father, Bernd, was on vacation in Croatia with other family members. Neither parent hesitated when Mike told them about his change of plans. They trusted him deeply. As mentioned earlier, Mike wasn't just any teenager. He had been traveling since he was very young, visiting almost every corner of the world. His parents often said that he was unusually mature for his age. Calm, independent, and resourceful, Mike had a quiet confidence that set him apart. He knew how to handle situations that would rattle even some adults, so when he told them he wanted to stay a bit longer, they didn't worry. They believed in him. After his girlfriend flew back to Germany, Mike was ready to experience Malta in his own way, solo, spontaneous, and unfiltered. He checked into a hotel in Sliema, a lively coastal city on the northeastern edge of the island. If you've ever been to Sliema, you'll know it's a hotspot, bustling with tourists, lined with stylish cafes, restaurants, and boutiques, and always humming with activity. It's also the most densely populated city in Malta, which means something's always happening, no matter the time of day. Mike booked a room at the Astra Hotel, a well-known place in the area that was popular among solo travelers. It wasn't too fancy, but it had everything he needed: a clean room, decent Wi-Fi, and a view of the Mediterranean. It was the perfect base for a young adventurer wanting to explore the island at his own pace. On the morning of the 18th of July, things started off pretty normal, or at least they seemed normal. Hotel surveillance footage captured Mike leaving room 105 at exactly 8:39 in the morning. He looked calm, casual, just a guy starting his day. Around 9:10, he was seen again at the hotel reception desk. He asked a few questions, nothing unusual, just small talk with the staff, probably about local attractions or bike rentals. He was polite, smiling, the same laid-back vibe he always carried. After a brief chat, he headed back upstairs. He stayed in his room for almost an hour. Then, at 9:55, he left room 105 again. And that's the last confirmed sighting of Mike. In the hotel's security footage, he was wearing a blue t-shirt with a black backpack slung over one shoulder and his phone in hand. He looked ready for another adventure under the warm Maltese sun. Inside his backpack, he had packed the essentials: his GoPro camera, a portable charger, his ID, a credit card, and some cash, just enough for a day trip. It was a bright, cloudless day, the kind that makes you want to explore every hidden corner of the island. From there, Mike walked to a nearby port where he rented a mountain bike. It was a blue and black Lombardo, sturdy, perfect for off-road trails. Just minutes later, at exactly 10:11 that morning, he sent a voice message to his dad via WhatsApp. His voice sounded upbeat and chill. He talked about the bike rental and how he was planning to cycle around the island. He mentioned the steep hills and how he might need to walk the bike in some parts. Mike even promised to send a photo soon, but that picture never came. And that was the last anyone heard from him. For a couple of days, no one heard from Mike, and at first, no one freaked out. Mike was always the adventurous type. He loved exploring on his own, soaking up new places and living in the moment. It wasn't unusual for him to go quiet for a while. Fast forward to July 22nd. That was the day Mike was supposed to fly back to Germany. His mom, Suzanne, and his sister, Maria, headed to the airport to pick him up. They stood at the arrival gate, scanning every face that walked through, expecting to see Mike rolling in with his backpack and a big smile. But Mike never showed up. At first they figured maybe he had a layover in Frankfurt and had landed there instead. But then Suzanne's anxiety kicked in. She tried calling Mike's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She kept calling, hoping for a different outcome, but it was the same every time. Nothing. Her gut was telling her something was off. She called the airline for answers, and that's when she got hit with a bombshell. Mike had never boarded the plane. He had missed the flight completely. Now, panic set in. Suzanne rushed to the police, filing a missing person report in the early hours of July 23rd. The authorities immediately took it seriously and put things into high gear, coordinating with the Maltese police. As Suzanne tried to piece things together, another shocker came her way. A German detective working on the case got word from the Maltese authorities. It turns out they'd already been searching for Mike for days. He had actually gone missing long before Suzanne realized something was wrong, on July 18th, the very day he rented that mountain bike. Mike had never returned the bike, which he was supposed to drop off the next day. He also never came back to the Astra Hotel to check out or grab his things. Concerned, the hotel manager reported Mike's disappearance to the Maltese police on July 20th. While the search for Mike was in full swing, his family in Germany had no idea what was happening in Malta. No one from the Maltese authorities had contacted them about Mike's disappearance. Some say it was because they didn't have the family's contact info. Others claim it was just negligence. Either way, Mike's dad, Bernd, was blindsided when he found out. Without wasting any time, he paused his vacation, grabbed Mike's brother Daniel, and hopped on the first flight to Malta. Though panic was setting in, Bernd tried to stay calm, thinking maybe Mike had missed his flight, lost his phone, or something like that. The family held on to hope, convinced Mike would turn up any minute. But what was really eating at Bernd was that Mike's phone was off, and there was no sign of him anywhere. Bernd stayed in constant contact with the authorities and even joined the search. The police combed every inch of Malta, checking ferries and small aircrafts, while flyers with Mike's face were plastered everywhere. On the 24th of July 2016, Interpol stepped in, and the case went international, with Germany and Malta working together. Then, on the 26th of July, 8 days after Mike vanished, the Maltese police got an anonymous tip. The caller said Mike was last seen near the Dingley Cliffs, 820 feet high and a hotspot for tourists. The guy who rented Mike the mountain bike had even mentioned that Mike had talked about visiting the Rabat catacombs nearby, so it was likely Mike had passed through that area. A full team was sent to the cliffs. Sniffer dogs, paramedics, firefighters, and Bernd and Daniel rushed there too. By the time they arrived, reporters were already asking questions, and emergency crews were on site. The search dogs soon picked up a scent, and after hours of searching, the unthinkable happened. Mike was found, but not alive. His body was discovered at the bottom of the cliffs, hidden under some bushes in a rocky outcrop. The bike he rented was found 98 feet above him, totally wrecked. Mike's body was sent in for an autopsy, and investigators found his sneakers and sunglasses nearby, but Mike was barefoot. His backpack, containing his phone, laptop, GoPro, money, and credit cards, was nowhere to be found. And the strangest part? Fresh hay was found near his body, as if someone had stepped on it and left a piece behind. But it couldn't have been Mike. He was barefoot, and his sneakers were found several feet away. When they asked a local farmer if he knew anything about the hay, he simply said he didn't. Bernd, Mike's father, wasn't about to let anything slide. After speaking with the farmer near the cliffs, he could tell something was off. The farmer seemed overly nervous, almost like he was avoiding the questions. When Bernd asked if he had seen anything unusual or if he knew where Mike's backpack might be, the farmer kept insisting he didn't know anything. But Bernd wasn't buying it. His heart was shattered over the loss of his son, but he refused to break down completely. He needed to get to the bottom of what had really happened. Mike's brother Daniel was hit the hardest. Unlike some half-siblings who struggled to get along, Daniel and Mike were inseparable. They had been thick as thieves, always dreaming about traveling the world together when they grew older. But now, those dreams were ripped away, leaving Daniel with a pain that was impossible to ignore.
My brother is it's a young, tough, athletic guy that always looking for a new challenge and a new target he can go on. And he came here for holidays and to explore the beautiful island. And he had a plan to come back, and we have to make it sure that he come back.
When Suzanne, Mike's mother, heard the devastating news, it felt like she was trapped in a nightmare that she couldn't escape. The idea that her son was gone was simply unimaginable. Mike's sister Maria was crushed too. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and now she would never see her brother again. And then there was Mike's girlfriend, who had already arrived in Germany, waiting eagerly for his return. She had been counting down the days, dreaming of finally being reunited with him. But in the blink of an eye, those plans were shattered, and the future they had imagined together was lost forever. Back then, this case didn't just shake Malta, it rocked the entire world. With Malta having a relatively low crime rate, something as tragic as this was completely unheard of. The news spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of media outlets in both Malta and Germany. But as the investigation dug deeper, even more strange and bizarre things started to unfold. Mike had always been obsessed with documenting his travels, filming every moment, which is why his GoPro was so important. If he'd captured anything on that last day, it could have been the missing piece to crack the case. But when Mike's body was found, only 3 items were recovered: his sneakers, his sunglasses, and the GoPro case. The case was attached to his belt, but no one knew whether it was empty or if the camera was inside. The GoPro itself, nowhere to be found. The moment Bernd, Mike's dad, arrived in Malta, he immediately asked about the GoPro. The lead investigator told him she had seen the GoPro case on Mike's belt and that it had been cataloged. But when Bernd went to check at the Astra Hotel where Mike stayed, all of Mike's belongings were handed over, except for the GoPro case. It didn't add up. Bernd couldn't shake the feeling that Mike had taken the case with him, and the camera, possibly holding crucial footage, could be the key to unraveling everything. But the next day, things got even stranger. All the police officers involved in the investigation suddenly denied ever seeing the camera case. They claimed nothing of the sort had been collected. Bernd was stunned. How could they deny it when the lead investigator herself had confirmed it? When he confronted her, she stuck to the same story. There was no case. Something was definitely fishy. Just when it seemed like the case couldn't get any weirder, the police made a statement declaring that Mike's death was an accident. According to them, he had simply fallen from the cliff while riding his bike. But the way Mike's body was found didn't add up to that explanation at all. If he had fallen while riding, he would have dropped straight down, right? But Mike's body was found in a position that suggested he had fallen backward, which was nearly impossible if it was a natural fall. Despite all the inconsistencies, the police quickly closed the case, claiming Mike had fallen from a height of more than 30 meters and had somehow rolled to the spot where his body was discovered. But there was more. The coroner, who examined Mike's body, told Bernd that Mike hadn't suffered because he had broken his neck in 2 places, which caused almost instant death. But here's the catch. No x-rays had been done on Mike's body at that point. So how could the coroner make that call? Was he just guessing? A month later, the autopsy report was finally released. It confirmed through DNA testing that the body was Mike's. It also revealed that Mike had been dead for about 8 days by the time he was found, which meant he likely died the very same day he left the hotel to explore the island. But here's the most bizarre part. The autopsy showed that Mike had no broken bones. None. This was highly suspicious, especially considering he supposedly fell from more than 98 feet. If that were true, he should have at least broken an arm or something. So why weren't there any fractures? This revelation cast doubt on the coroner's statement and made Bernd's suspicions grow. A forensic examination of Mike's rented bike only deepened the mystery. The bike's condition didn't match what would be expected from a fall of over 98 feet from a cliff. Everything was starting to feel wrong, like pieces of a puzzle that just didn't fit. Then, just days before the official autopsy report was finalized, an employee from the morgue, who had been responsible for Mike's body, approached Bernd with a hushed warning. She told him that everything about Mike's death seemed suspicious. No broken bones completely contradicted the police's story that Mike had simply fallen from the cliff while riding his bike. She urged Bernd to think carefully about his next steps, suggesting that the police seemed to have no interest in pursuing the case any further. This only added to Bernd's growing distrust of the investigation. Desperate for answers, Bernd went to speak with the head of the investigation, the same officer who had first claimed to have seen the GoPro case attached to Mike's belt. only to later deny it. But this time, she refused to speak with him. She dodged his questions and acted as though the entire matter wasn't worth her attention. This only fueled Bernd's suspicions. Why was the investigation being handled so poorly? Why were they denying even the simplest facts? He kept pressing the authorities about Mike's GoPro, believing it held the key to understanding what really happened. Just days later, the forensic department in Malta handed Bernd a camera, claiming it belonged to Mike. But what they handed him was an old Canon model from the early days of digital photography, not the GoPro Hero 2 that Mike had been using to document his travels. Along with the camera came a memory card, completely destroyed. The authorities claimed it had been found inside the camera when it was recovered next to Mike's body. Bernd immediately knew this was not his son's camera. The authorities were trying to pass off an old, outdated camera as Mike's, likely hoping he would stop asking questions about the real GoPro. By now, Mike's family had grown deeply suspicious of the Maltese police. The lack of interest in the case, the inconsistencies, and the strange actions of the authorities were all too much to ignore. Bernd confronted some officers about who might have stolen his son's belongings. The officers, almost dismissively, claimed that no one from Malta would steal items from a body, suggesting it might have been a tourist. But then there were the phone records. The police claimed they had pulled location data from Mike's phone carrier, only to report that they found absolutely nothing. No records, no trace. Everything seemed to be going in circles. Frustrated with the inconsistencies, the lack of progress, and the growing feeling that something was being hidden, Bernd was ready to make serious accusations against the authorities. But before he could take any action, he had to return to Germany to arrange his son's funeral and deal with the heartbreaking aftermath of the tragedy. Mike's body landed in Germany on August 17, 2016, and what was supposed to be a moment of mourning quickly spiraled into something out of a true crime documentary. The funeral home staff, tasked with preparing his body for burial, were immediately disturbed. Mike's body looked eerily deflated, like someone had let all the air out of him. It was obvious something was wrong. Even worse, he hadn't been embalmed at all, which was bizarre considering his case was still under investigation. The smell was unmistakably that of raw decomposition, not the usual chemical scent you'd expect from a preserved body. The moment they realized this, the funeral home workers called the police. One officer casually mentioned that airport staff had already thought the coffin felt way too light when it arrived. That was enough to raise every red flag imaginable. Mike's body was quickly sent to the Medical University of Hanover, and what they uncovered was horrifying. His body weighed only 16 kilograms. That's about 35 pounds. When they opened him up, almost all of his internal organs were missing. His brain, heart, lungs, liver, pancreas, adrenal glands, right kidney, bladder, stomach, intestines. Every vital organ was stripped from his body. Only tiny scraps of his left kidney, diaphragm, spleen, and colon remained. No wonder he looked so deflated. He was practically empty. Now, yes, it's normal to remove organs during an autopsy. But here's the catch. They're supposed to be either returned to the body or replaced with something like cotton or sawdust. And if they're not returned, there should be a full report explaining why. None of that was done. Mike's body was just left as an empty shell with no explanation, no documentation, and no dignity. His family was devastated. His father, Bernd, wrote a heartfelt letter to the Maltese authorities, begging them to send back his son's organs so he could lay him to rest properly. However, what he got back was shocking. The coroner claimed that animals had eaten the organs before Mike's body was found. Seriously? That didn't make any sense. The original Maltese autopsy made zero mention of animal bites or injuries. No claw marks, no chewed-up skin, nothing to back up that wild claim. And so, the German authorities stepped in. What once looked like a tragic accident was starting to look more and more like a crime. They opened a full investigation. The forensic team in Hanover asked for a copy of the original autopsy report from Malta, but, surprise, It never came. And without Mike's organs, their second autopsy was already limited. But that didn't stop Bernd and Suzanne from fighting. They filed a formal complaint and demanded answers. Through their lawyer, they revealed an email from the Maltese coroner, where he now claimed rodents had eaten the organs and that Mike's brain had liquefied. The parents were done with the excuses. They took the fight to court, and the German prosecutors began leaning into a more sinister theory. What if Mike was murdered? They also called out the Maltese coroners for doing an incredibly sloppy job. A new autopsy was ordered, even though the body had already deteriorated. This time, Maltese officials had to be present so no one could twist the facts. And once again, the findings were disturbing. There were no bite marks, no signs of rodents. Just a small nibble on the neck and a faint abrasion on the forearm, definitely not enough to explain the missing organs. Plus, it was reconfirmed that Mike's body had been fully intact when it was recovered from under the cliffs and transported to the Maltese morgue. Most importantly, the new autopsy revealed what might be the biggest failure of all. Mike had never been embalmed. Because of that, his body had decomposed too much, destroying any remaining evidence that could have pointed to what really happened. To top it all off, there was absolutely no proof that Mike had died from falling off the cliffs. Nothing matched the story Malta had been pushing. And just like that, a simple case of a missing person found dead had transformed into a full-blown mystery. Despite all of this, the Maltese authorities stood by their version of events, insisting that Mike had tragically fallen off a cliff. The first autopsy, done by Malta's own forensic team, included 3 people, including Dr. Mario, the country's chief forensic doctor. Dr. Mario, who had an impressive reputation, was there when the body was found and performed the autopsy himself. However, when Mike's parents and journalists asked for more details, Dr. Mario was strangely tight-lipped. He only responded to one email from Mike's father, Baron, saying the organs were already missing before the autopsy, suggesting that rodents had eaten them. He also mentioned that Mike's brain had dissolved due to the sun's heat. Dr. Mario stated that he had shared this information with the head of the investigation, but the German forensic team didn't buy it. They quickly debunked the idea of rodents having eaten Mike's organs, as there were no bite marks found on his body. As for the brain liquefying in the sun, that was just plain absurd according to the Germans. They pointed out that many countries have summer temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, and no one had ever seen anything like this happen. Furthermore, Dr. Mario had documented that Mike's body was found lying on his back, but the German team didn't believe he'd died where he was found. They theorized that Mike could have been alive when he hit the beach and crawled to a shaded area under the cliff. They even considered asphyxiation as a possible cause of death, especially because Mike's hyoid bone was missing, an indication of strangulation. By November of 2017, Bernd had had enough. He returned to Malta and tried to speak with the police and detectives involved in his son's case, but they wouldn't cooperate. He then filed a legal request to access all the case files, only to be told the judge was sick and known for being slow in approving judicial decisions. Eventually, Baron was able to gain access to the documents through a German diplomat in Malta, but when he reviewed the files, several key pieces were missing. The autopsy results and photos from the crime scene had mysteriously disappeared. In January of 2018, the Maltese government finally caved under pressure from the German authorities and reopened Mike's case. The first documents related to the case were sent to Germany, and the German media began covering the story once again. The German parliament even started debating it. However, the new judge assigned to the case also concluded that Mike's death was due to a fall from the cliff, and nothing really changed. The German authorities, despite finding numerous inconsistencies in the case, found themselves at a dead end with the limited evidence they had. Most people who analyze the case, full of holes and carelessness from the diplomats, investigators, and journalists, have serious doubts about the Maltese authorities' official verdict. Bernd became exhausted and disheartened by all the negligence and decided to stop pushing for more answers. He shifted his focus to his family, feeling that they would never truly know what happened to Mike. A German newspaper that had been following the case from the beginning even tried to revisit the story. But when they reached out to the Maltese authorities, they were met with silence. No one involved in Mike's case seemed willing to talk, almost as if they were trying to cover it up. Theories surrounding Mike's case are still floating around, with one of the most popular being that Mike could have been a victim of organ trafficking. Mike was a healthy young man, and the absence of his organs has made many wonder if he was targeted by traffickers. According to this theory, Mike could have been approached while cycling through a remote area of Malta. The traffickers would have taken him to a location, removed his organs, stitched him back up, and then dumped him off the cliff to make it look like an accident. Some believe the Maltese authorities discovered everything but chose to cover it up because of the potential damage to tourism. Another theory suggests that Mike was robbed by thieves who took his belongings and then threw him off the cliff. According to this idea, Mike may have been strangled, and his body was placed where it was found to prevent further damage to the island's tourism industry. If Mike had been strangled, authorities might have decided to remove his hyoid bone, brain, and other organs to avoid revealing the truth. There's also the possibility that Mike simply fell off the cliff on his own, and people who passed by took the opportunity to steal his belongings. The least accepted theory is that Mike might have taken his own life, but that was quickly dismissed early in the investigation. Everything about Mike's life pointed to him being happy, full of plans, in love, and showing no signs of mental illness or depression. Mike Mansholt's case remains one of the most mysterious and incomplete cases ever documented. The Maltese authorities still maintain their version of events, that Mike fell off the cliff, and anything beyond that is merely a conspiracy theory. But what do you think happened to Mike? Was it a tragic accident, or was he the victim of something far more sinister? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've made it this far, be sure to check out this next video. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you once again for watching.